Imagine spending countless hours on world building, only to realize you've created an elaborate cage that traps your story instead of setting it free. I've been crafting fantasy worlds for over 25 years now, and I can tell you, this trap is more common than you might think. But here's the good news. With the right approach, your world building can nurture your creativity instead of smothering it. In this video, I'll walk you through the delicate balance between detail and mystery, the power of imperfection, and how to create a world that evolves with your story rather than constraining it. But perhaps most importantly, I'll show you the one world building element that most fantasy writers overlook, and it's the key to making your world truly unforgettable. Before I can share this with you though, you need to understand the fundamentals. Too many world builders misguidedly think they already do, and it will wreck your world and story as well if you take this lightly. But first things first, what exactly is world building? It's not just about drawing fancy maps or inventing cool creatures. World building is the art of creating a living, breathing universe that feels real enough to step into. It's this secret ingredient that makes your favorite fantasy stories come alive, the bedrock of every great tale you've ever loved. Now let me break down the core elements of world building for you. Think of these as the colors on your creative palette, each one vital to painting your world into existence. We start with the physical world, your canvas. This is where geography, climate, and natural resources come into play. Then we have the inhabitants, the characters who call your world home. Next, I'll walk you through the cultural aspects. How do your inhabitants organize themselves? What do they believe? From there, we look at historical background. What major events have shaped your world? Now it's time to consider magic and technology systems. What extraordinary elements exist in your world? And then lastly, we cannot forget about economy and politics. How do resources flow in your world? Who holds power and how is it maintained? These elements drive conflicts and shape societies in ways you might not expect. Do you feel a bit overwhelmed already? Then don't worry, because that's perfectly normal. World building is a big task. But I've got a secret weapon for you. It's called the single scene technique, and it's about to become your best friend. Here's how it works. Close your eyes and imagine one scene in your world that is relevant to your story. Maybe it's a bustling marketplace in a floating city, or a mysterious ritual in an underground dwarven kingdom. Focus on the details. What do you see? Perhaps there's a soft, pulsing glow emanating from runes carved into the cavern walls. And what do you hear? Maybe the rhythmic clang of ceremonial hammers on ancient anvils, each strike releasing a shower of magical sparks. Now let's dig even deeper. Where does this magic come from? Perhaps the dwarves draw power from the very stone around them, the magic and extension of the earth itself. This immediately tells us something about their culture, their connection to their environment, and possibly even their creation myth. Now, as you can see, a single scene can be your gateway to world building. It gives you a foothold in your world, something concrete to build from. And trust me, once you start, it's addictive because you can repeat it over and over again. From such a single scene, we then expand using 4 key principles. First, there's consistency. Ensure that all elements of your world work together logically. If you've shown flying market stalls, consider how this technology or magic affects other aspects of your world. Does everyone have access to it? How does it impact transportation, warfare, or social status? Secondly then, think about cause and effect. Every aspect of your world should influence others. If your scene showed an underground dwarven kingdom, consider what led to a society underneath the surface. This could have been scarcity of surface resources, or a need for protection. Then also think about the effects caused by this, like advanced mining technique, a culture that values gems, or tensions with surface dwellers. From here, consider depth over breadth. It's better to deeply develop a small part of your world than to create a sprawling but shallow universe. So dive deeper into the location of your single scene. What's the history of this place? What conflicts exist here? Who are the key players? Lastly, leave room for mystery. You don't need to explain everything. Some elements can remain enigmatic, sparking curiosity. Maybe there's a strange artifact in the marketplace whose purpose is unknown, or a sealed door in the dwarven kingdom that no one can open. These mysteries can drive curiosity and potentially become plot points later on. Always remember that world building is an iterative process. Your world will evolve as your story does. Don't be afraid to revise or refine as you go. The goal isn't to create a perfect static world, but a rich dynamic universe full of storytelling potential. Now that we've laid the foundation with our single scene technique, It's time to zoom out and paint on a broader canvas based on the core elements of world building I shared earlier. Let me first explain more about the physical world and its inhabitants, the stage and actors of your grand narrative. You have to understand that world building is like playing with cosmic Lego. Sometimes you build a masterpiece, and sometimes you step on a sharp piece in the middle of the night. Both can be valuable experiences. You either celebrate the success, or you learn to tidy up more. But to increase the chances of a masterpiece, you have to start with the basics: climate and geography. Is your world a patchwork of diverse biomes, or is it dominated by a single extreme environment? Consider how these factors shape everything else. A world of endless deserts will give rise to very different cultures and creatures than one covered in lush rainforests. But don't stop at the surface. Delve beneath it. What secrets lie underground? Are there vast cave systems teeming with strange life, or perhaps a network of molten rivers that adventurers could navigate? And what about the sky? Is it filled with floating islands, or crisscrossed by the paths of celestial bodies that influence the tides of magic? Remember, in fantasy, the laws of nature are yours to shape. Maybe gravity works differently in certain areas, or perhaps there are places where time flows backwards. The key is to consider the implications of these fantastical elements. How would they affect the flora, fauna, and civilizations that call this world home? Speaking of inhabitants, this is where your world truly comes to life. Your characters are not just puppets on a stage. They are the products of their environment, shaped by the world around them. When crafting your inhabitants, use the common races that fit into your world, but also dare to think beyond the typical stereotypes. Sure, elves and dwarves have their place, but why not push the boundaries every now and then? What kind of beings could evolve in a world where the ground is constantly shifting, or in a realm where dreams manifest as physical entities? Consider how your inhabitants have adapted to their environment. A species living in the dark depths of an endless ocean might have developed echolocation instead of sight. Creatures in a world with low gravity might have delicate, spindly limbs that would snap under our Earth's gravitational pull. But adaptation isn't just physical. How has the environment shaped their society, their beliefs, their technology? A culture that developed in a resource-scarce world might have elaborate recycling systems and strict laws against waste. A species that lives in a world of constant daylight might have no concept of sleep as we know it. The key to creating compelling inhabitants is to make them feel like a natural part of your world. They should fit into their environment like a key in a lock, their very existence telling a story about the world they inhabit. But while your world shapes its denizens, they too in turn shape the world itself. Maybe a race of stone eaters has honeycombed a mountain range with their tunnels. Or perhaps a civilization's reckless use of magic has created vast dead zones where nothing can grow. This dynamic relationship between world and inhabitants is the beating heart of your fantasy realm. So now that we've sculpted the physical world and breathed life into its inhabitants, it's time to add their culture and history. This is where your creation starts to feel real, where it develops a heartbeat of its own. In one of my early worlds, I created a mercantile society but overlooked the importance of trade routes. It's like creating a culture of fishermen with not a single water body nearby. That obviously required some serious reconsideration and taught me to think beyond the borders of individual cultures. So how do we create cultures that feel authentic, diverse, and captivating? It's not about throwing random elements together and hoping they stick. Instead, think of culture as a living ecosystem, with each element influencing and being influenced by the others. Start by asking questions. Lots of questions. What does this culture value and why? How do they view outsiders? What are their taboos, their celebrations, their coming of age rituals? But don't stop at the surface. Dig deeper. How do different members of society view these customs? Are there subcultures or countercultures? What happens to those who don't fit in? Remember, cultures aren't monoliths. They're made up of individuals with their own thoughts, beliefs, and quirks. The more you can reflect this diversity within your cultures, the more real they will feel. And don't forget the history. Past events leave their mark on cultures just as surely as they do on landscapes. A culture that survived a great calamity might be more focused on preservation and caution. One with a history of conquest might value martial prowess or be grappling with the legacy of its past actions. To help you visualize all these interconnected elements, I want to introduce you to a concept I call the culture web. Imagine a web with your culture at the center. From this center, strands radiate out to connect with environment, history, beliefs, social structure, technology, and more. By tracing these connections, you can see how a change in one area might ripple out to affect others. For example, let's say you have a culture that lives on the edge of an ever-expanding desert. Their environment, which is harsh and dry, influences their technology of advanced water conservation, which in turn affects their social structure, which is all about those who control water hold power. And their history, including legends of a great drought, shape their beliefs that fuel water worship, which influences their customs that include rain dances and water-sharing rituals. But remember, as far as you can take this, the goal isn't to create perfect, unchanging cultures. It's just to create societies that feel alive with all the contradictions, conflicts, and complexities that it entails. Because it's in these messy, beautiful details that truly unforgettable worlds are born. So as you develop your cultures, don't be afraid to let them surprise you. Sometimes the most interesting aspects of a culture arise from unexpected connections or contradictions within your culture web. Maybe your desert-dwelling water worshippers also have a tradition of fire dancing, a remnant of an ancient volcanic eruption that saved them from invasion. In the end, creating rich cultures and deep histories is about crafting a world that feels like it existed long before your story began and will continue long after it ends. Now, if you found anything useful in the video so far, please consider giving it a like to help me grow the channel. Thank you. Okay, so we've explored the physical world and the cultures that inhabit it. Now let's dive into two elements that often define fantasy and science fiction: magic and advanced technology. These systems can transform the impossible into reality, but they require careful design to enhance rather than hinder your storytelling. At the heart of many fantasy worlds obviously lies magic, and a well-crafted magic system can inspire wonder, drive plots, and define characters. But how do we create a magic system that's not just cool, but coherent and compelling? Start with the source. Where does magic come from in your world? Is it an innate ability some are born with, a gift from the gods? Or perhaps it's a natural force like gravity that can be harnessed with the right knowledge? The origin of magic will deeply influence how it's perceived and used in your world. For example, let's say magic in your world comes from the stars. This single decision can ripple out to affect your entire world. Cultures might have deep connections to astronomy. Calendars and festivals could revolve around celestial events. Stargazers might be revered as potential mages. But here's the crucial part: set limits. Limitations are where the real magic and storytelling happens. If your star mages could do anything, where's the challenge? Where's the tension? But what if their power wanes during the day? What if certain stars grant different abilities? What if using magic drains life force? Suddenly you've got potential for conflict, strategy, and compelling narratives. So consider how magic integrates into your world's development. A society with easy access to healing magic might never develop modern medicine. A world where mages can conjure food might have very different agricultural practices. Magic should be woven into the fabric of your world, influencing everything from daily life to grand politics. Now, in science fiction or science fantasy settings, advanced technology often takes the place of or complements magic. First, consider the origin and development of your advanced technology. Was it a gradual progression, the result of a singular breakthrough? Perhaps it was gifted by alien visitors or uncovered from ancient ruins. The history of your technology will shape how it's understood and used. Next then, define the capabilities and limitations of your technology. What problems has it solved? What new challenges has it created? Perhaps your world has mastered faster than light travel, but can't cure the common cold. Or maybe they've achieved immortality, but at the cost of severe overpopulation. These contrasts can create interesting tensions in your world. But always remember that integration is key. How has advanced technology changed society? A world with teleportation technology would have radically different concepts of borders and trade. Artificial intelligence might revolutionize governance or education. Think through how your technology would realistically impact various aspects of life. Now, in some worlds then, magic and advanced technology coexist. This can lead to fascinating dynamics. Does one dominate the other? Do they complement one another? Perhaps magic is seen as unreliable and outdated compared to technology. Or maybe technology is viewed as soulless compared to the art of magic. Consider how magic and technology interact on a practical level as well. Can magic interfere with technological devices? Can technology detect or measure magical energies? The interplay between these systems can be a rich source of conflict and innovation in your world. But whether you're dealing with magic or advanced technology, or both, consider the societal implications. Who has access to these powers? How does this create or reinforce power structures in your world? Are magic users or text experts revered, feared, or persecuted? Remember, the goal isn't to create a perfectly logical system, although internal consistency is important. The goal is to create a system that enhances your story, that creates interesting conflicts and opportunities for your characters. Whether they're wielding spells or piloting starships, your magic or technology system should open up new possibilities for storytelling, while feeling like a natural, integral part of your world. Now that we've explored the magic and technology that make your world extraordinary, let's dive into what makes it tick on a day-to-day basis. After all, it's not spells or starships that make the world go round. It's economics and politics. I know what you're thinking. Economics? Politics? Isn't that the boring stuff? And trust me, I once thought the same. In my early days of world building, I focused all my energy on creating epic magic systems and fantastical creatures, neglecting the mundane aspects of how my societies actually functioned. The results were worlds that felt hollow, with characters whose motivations didn't quite ring true. But once I embraced the power of economics and politics, my worlds came alive in ways I've never expected. So let's start with economics. At its core, an economic system is about how your world manages resources. What's valuable in your world? Is it something tangible, like gold or oil? Or maybe it's something fantastical, like mana or starlight? The key to designing a realistic economic system is understanding scarcity and distribution. What resources are rare? Who controls them? And how are they traded? Consider this. A world where water is scarce will have very different economic structures than one where people can conjure it out of thin air. A society that has mastered energy production might value completely different resources than one that still is reliant on fossil fuels. But here's where many world builders miss a trick. They create cool resources or currencies, but forget to think about how these economic realities shape their world. A society built on trading memories, for example, would have wildly different social structures, technologies, and ethical dilemmas than one based on gold coins. How would crime work in a memory-based economy? What would constitute wealth? How would this impact education, entertainment, or diplomacy? And now let's stir politics into this bubbling cauldron of world building. Politics at its heart is about power. Who has it? How did they get it? And what are they doing to keep it? When creating political structures, think beyond the typical kingdom or empire. Maybe your world is governed by a council of elemental spirits. Perhaps power lies with those who control the flow of information rather than armies or wealth. Or consider a world where political power is determined by magical ability. How would that shape society? The key to compelling political conflicts is understanding motivations. What drives your political players? Is it ideology, personal ambition, or something more complex? A villain fighting to maintain an unjust system because they genuinely believe it's for the greater good is far more interesting than a cartoon tyrant. But here's the real magic, the interplay between economics and politics. In the real world, these forces are inextricably linked, and your fictional world should be no different. Who benefits from the current economic system? Who's trying to change it? How do political decisions impact trade, and vice versa? For example, in a world where magic is a finite resource, how might political structures form around its control and distribution? Will we see magical cartels akin to oil cartels in our world? How might non-magical people advocate for their rights in a mage-ruled world? Now, I can already hear you saying, but I'm creating a fantasy world. Do I really need to worry about trade policies and political maneuvering? And the answer is a resounding yes. Because here's the secret. Economics and politics are powerful tools for driving your plot and shaping your characters. Think about it. A character from a poor background will have very different motivations and challenges than one born into privilege. A plot centered around a trade dispute might not sound thrilling on paper, but it could be the spark that ignites a world-changing conflict. Just look at how trade disputes in our own history have led to revolutions and even wars. By deeply considering the economics and politics of your world, you're creating a real ecosystem of motivations, of conflicts, and lots of opportunities. Now, if you're hungry for even more practical tips, make sure to sign up for my free weekly newsletter, which is packed with bite-sized, actionable advice to transform your world building and fantasy writing in just 5 minutes a week. You can find the link in the description below. Now, remember when I said I'd show you the one world building element that most fantasy writers overlook? Well, the time has come to spill the beans. It's something so obvious, yet so often neglected, that it's hiding in plain sight. I'm talking about the environment itself. But not just any old backdrop, I'm talking about ecological storytelling, the art of making your landscapes active participants in your narrative. Every hill, every river, every forest in your world should have a story to tell. So let's start with the basics. Your world's landscape is not just scenery, it's a living record of your world's history and conflicts. That jagged mountain range over there? Maybe it was raised by warring earth elementals eons ago. That vast desert? Perhaps it was once a lush forest turned to sand by a mage's curse. But it's not just about big dramatic changes. The subtler touches often pack the biggest punch. Imagine a forest where the trees grow in perfect rows, a silent testament to an ancient, long-forgotten civilization. Or a coastline where the cliffs are unnaturally smooth, shaped by centuries of merfolk songs. Now let's talk about entire ecosystems. In a world with magic or advanced technology, your flora and fauna are a chance to showcase the unique aspects of your world. Picture carnivorous plants that have evolved to prey on magical energies, or animals that have adapted to thrive in areas of high technological radiation. But here's where the real magic happens. When you use your environment to inform your world's past and present. That river that splits your continent in two? Maybe its winding path traces the borders of ancient long-fallen empires. Or those peculiar rock formations? They could be all that remains of colossal magical battles fought centuries ago. And don't forget how the environment shapes culture. A society that evolved in a world of constant rainfall will have a very different architecture, clothing, and even social customs than one that developed in a harsh desert. Now I know what you might be thinking, but I'm not writing a nature documentary. And you're right. The goal isn't to bog down your narrative with endless descriptions of plants and rocks. It's to create a world that feels alive, where every element has purpose and meaning. This is the power of ecological storytelling, about creating landscapes that don't just exist in the background, but actively contribute to your narrative. It's about crafting a world where the environment is as much a character as any hero or villain. That is the true magic of storytelling. And to make sure you use that world building properly in your story, check out this video here where I share insights from 25 years of fantasy writing so that you can learn from my experience, avoid my mistakes, and propel your writing journey forward.